Okay, I think we'll get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. My name is Carly Easton. I'm going to be a little bit of a moderator, but also a panelist, so I'll be kind of moving things along as we go along through the talk. This is a talk on how and why to improve your journal club, and we have a fantastic group of panelists that I will introduce here in just a few minutes. These are our disclosures that we are required to give, but really none are related to this talk. So, the overall goals for today are, we want this to be kind of a safe space for people to talk about Journal Club, because Journal Club is a really big challenge, I think, and we want to talk about objectives for Journal Club, the pros and cons of different styles, because there is no one size fits all. Every program is different, and you'll learn that all 7 of us do Journal Club a little bit differently, because that's what works for our program. And so there is no one way to do things. We want to talk about some do's and don'ts that we've learned over the years. And then hopefully, as you learn some of these things, you can identify what the best takeaways are for your program. So I want to get a sense from the audience, who is here? So are there medical students? Residents? Some residents? Attendings? Is everyone else? Is anyone a Journal Club leader? Okay. Are you loving your journal clubs as they are? Yeah? No? So that's why we're here, is to hopefully give you some tools in how to improve what you already have going. So this is going to be a little bit of information about the panelists, and I'll start. So I'm Carly Easton. I'm from University of Arkansas in Little Rock, and I've been there 11 years, and all of those 11 years I've been our journal club director. And we have 10 residents per year, so about 30 residents. And the current format of our journal club is we do, it's in an evening at a faculty member's home in a small group format. So we're just gonna all kind of introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Laura Melville. I am at NYP Brooklyn Methodist. I've been leading Journal Club for 20 some odd years. I feel a little like I'm in a 12-step program. Like, I've been leading Journal Club for 20 some years. I've done a lot of bad things, and some of them have worked really well. That's my story.
I'm Addie Malik. I'm at KU in Kansas City. I have not been leading Journal Club for 20 years. I actually don't lead our Journal Club at my current institution, but have done so in my past institutions and have provided significant input into that one and also suggestions for this one. So I'm up here to kind of describe some of the things that have worked in the past and some that haven't.
Hi. I'm Rebecca Richards. I'm from The Ohio State University. I've been faculty for about 10 years. I've seen our journal club progress from being nothing, it dissolved, and was nothing, to then come back in different formats. So I've lived through probably every format there could be. And currently I lead an EBM didactic series that's part of our resident curriculum that complements our journal club, which occurs at a faculty member's house in the evenings in a large group format.
James Paxton, Detroit, Wayne State University. I'm the Director of Clinical Research, and I've been involved in Journal Club on and off for about 15 years, varying degrees of success, and sometimes responsible, sometimes less responsible for that, but do our best. And I'm also working on a book, which we hope will be released later this year. It's sponsored by ACEP RSI section, which will be exactly on this topic of how to develop and run a journal club. So if you have input on that, we'd love to hear about it.
Somebody else has input on the speaker.
Can you yell?
I can yell. Oh, yeah. I'm Dan Nair. I'm retired from active clinical practice at Albany Medical College, where I was for 27 years and was one of the non-leaders of Journal Club, which we did regularly, monthly, usually at a restaurant sponsored by a drug company. Now I'm in a much more challenging role. I am a faculty of sorts for several dental residencies, and I'm trying to teach them EBM through these mini journal clubs. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been trying to get my dentist to invite me to his journal club, and for some reason he doesn't want me.
Hi, my name is Brian Kane. I'm at Lehigh Valley promise I'll give you those chapters I owe you for the book, James. You're almost done. Almost done. But I think at our core, what we've tried to do with our journal club is marry it to an evidence-based metric. So we have some standard curricula embedded in the actual articles themselves. So I've been told that I'm cheesy. So the way we do our journal club is I put cheese on the vegetables. That's how I get my kids to eat at home. My wife's an academic ear doc, so when she works through midnight, it's my job to feed the kids. So I do the same thing in journal club. I put cheese on the vegetables.
And I just thought I'd add for those of you that are interested, the dental literature is way worse than medical literature.
So Rebecca's going to talk a little bit about the must-haves.
I think that you can turn.
Do you guys feel like we need the mics, or are we like? So,
As a group, we put together what we think of, regardless of what your format is, what might be the characteristics that we would all consider necessary or must-haves. And we think it's absolutely important that you have someone who's a champion in your faculty group, of course. And the reason why we put this up here, EBM champion, this is really interesting because you maybe have seen some people who are heavily involved in research lead your journal club and do a great job at it, and you've maybe seen those people crash and burn because not every resident wants to be a researcher. And so EBM, I would argue, is very different than research. I tell my residents, I'm not teaching you statistics. I'm teaching you how to be a lifelong learner. I'm teaching you how to use evidence to guide your clinical decisions. And so I say EBM champion because I think it's a unique position. I think it's important that if you lead your department, that you lead that from the top down. So these people should be valued, they should be supported in a best case scenario, and they should be trained up because EBM is its own thing. So I'll give you an example of what my chair did really well when I started. I was doing an MPH in translational science, and they said, we really need someone to help with the resident curriculum. Will you go to this McMaster course and learn about evidence-based clinical practice? So they sent me, and they valued it, they supported me, they trained me up, and positioned me to be successful. And so I think that's maybe unique, but shouldn't be. And so an EBM champion in some iteration is important and necessary. We put objectives and goals up here, and Carly let me talk, and she's gonna have to take the microphone out of my hand because I could talk about objectives and goals forever. What is the purpose of your journal club? If you don't know the answer to that, you need to stop and think about what is the answer to that question. So is the purpose of your journal club to keep up with the literature? Could be, and that's okay. Is the purpose of your journal club to teach foundational points of evidence of emergency medicine? Do you want your residents to be able to quote foundational articles, understand them, and say them successfully to their patients or their peers? Could be. Do you want to use your journal club to teach principles of evidence-based practice? Do you want to teach principles of critical appraisal? Could be. Can you do all of those things? Maybe, but probably not. And so considering what am I really setting out to do is a necessary first step to your journal club. Then you can have goals for your sessions, you can have objectives for your sessions, but I really encourage you, if you don't already know what is the goal of my journal club, to stop and consider that. The next is considering some kind of critical appraisal guide. So we're going to give you a list of resources that we like, tools, websites, organizations that support what we do, maybe that publish critical appraisal forms that we found helpful. And so we do think that that is important because it provides a framework. The way we teach medical students to read an EKG with a framework, the way we teach residents to read a chest x-ray with a framework. We can use these forms as a framework for how we read articles. And then, I would encourage you to consider how can that maybe evolve from the way that some of us with gray hair up here learned evidence-based practice and use critical appraisal forms to what our current students demand and need, and maybe how those tools could evolve with us. We were just joking a little bit about how AI might change the future, and AI is definitely going to change the future, right? But how is it going to change EBM? And so the last thing we would add is food and socialization never hurt. So considering how you can make it fun for the residents and encourage interaction through those tools, and I think we'll talk more about that.
So why do we care about this? Just a couple of very quick slides on why this is important. First, it's a requirement, if you didn't already know that. So this is one of the competency requirements for residency, and ideally, our residents are getting to that level for check off where by the time they're graduating, where they can really take evidence to the patient, and even when it's, conflicting evidence, they can kind of understand that and know what to do with that patient. The other thing, and maybe even more important, is that this is teaching us how to be a lifelong learner. And, your training and your education doesn't stop with residency. You're going to be learning forever, and you'll never know everything. And so being able to take the literature and, take what you can from it and understand it and being able to interpret it and bring that to the bedside is really important as you go along in your career. So there's some barriers listed here on how to successfully execute a journal club. As we were talking as a group, we kind of came up with 4 big themes on areas that we feel like maybe we can talk about today. So the first theme is formatting. Anybody have problems with formatting? The second theme is going to be attendance. Does anybody have issues with attendance? The third is engagement. Probably the biggest, most difficult part of a journal club is engagement. And then the fourth is going to be assessment. How do we maybe grade these journal clubs? Are we grading them, or are there even ways to do that? And how are we giving residents credit for this work that they're doing? So we're going to go through each of these in detail and just kind of talk about the do's and don'ts. So first we're going to start with formatting. And so I'm going to turn over to Laura here, and she's going to talk a little bit about formatting, and then the rest of the panel will weigh in. And please, as we go along, if you have questions or you have a suggestion or a specific problem that's related to formatting or any of the themes that we're talking about, please, we want this to be a discussion, and we don't want to be just talking at you. So if you have questions, please, please, please raise your hand, and we'll bring it up to the group.
Okay, so formatting. I think you can say that formatting is one of the hardest pieces of the whole puzzle of Journal Club. I know for us, we've gone through many, many changes, and I think change in some ways has been both the hardest part and the best part of our journal clubs. So I'll start with what you definitely almost never should do, which is the sort of one person reads an article and stands up and presents the article to everyone else, most of whom, even if you gave the article, didn't read it. So the book report style of Journal Club. Have certainly done it. Not fun for anyone. Rarely do you get from that foundation, you just don't get much of the other things we're looking for, engagement or whatever. So one of the things that we've been doing recently that's been, I think, helpful is really trying to make sure that we get I get like a whole year's worth of assigned people. So I know months in advance who's going to be doing it. We try to get them engaged in literature search. So when you're talking about kind of what's your why, one of the whys that we've tried to use is to get people to be able to search things. Like if you want to know the answer to something, you don't know how to do a real lit search and not just Google. Yes, also Google, but not just Google. Like how to even go back and forth between Google and PubMed and try to figure that out. So I try to get them to do that like 2 weeks in advance and give me a list and let's look through what you've generated. So then the next part of that is where is it set? So we've been in wonderful, we've been able to go out usually as a big group. So most of our journal clubs have been a big group. And whether it's in the conference or not in the conference, venue we'll go into more, but it's usually been a big group format, which most of the time has been pretty good, but sometimes you kind of lose people around the edges, right? So there's a little group that's engaged, but maybe not everyone. So I find it helpful to sometimes to just kind of randomly throw in new formats, like at least a few times during the year. So ours is usually monthly. It's usually at conference, and that is not ideal, but that's just the way it is right now. But it's one of the things I've managed to do. So we are in the hospital, which means I can engage some other people. So I usually base ours on kind of clinical questions. What's the clinical question that people have? And if there, let's say, recently we had a big debate about contrast nephropathy. Is that a thing? So you get the guy in nephrology who's always yelling at you for, inducing contrast nephrology. You say, hey, can you come to Journal Club? I'd like you to, pick your favorite paper. Pick the ones you think absolutely prove that we're doing it wrong, and come and talk about it, and then I'll get our residents we'll go through the process, they'll pick a few, and then they'll debate. Now, granted, that's not your most kind of how to dissect a paper version, but if it's sprinkled in, I think it's still, it brings people back to the table. Another one that we've done recently, I feel like, I don't know, residents, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but somehow small groups had become the thing. Like I woke up one morning, everybody wants small groups. Can't we just do things in small groups? Okay, you want small groups? Small groups. So I will cheat and take Annals, and Annals has a series of questions, right? I give them one paper this time, maybe instead of, 3 residents get 3 papers. 3 residents get 1 paper, and then I give them the questions from the Annals thing. I don't tell them if they have enough initiative to look it up, great. And if they don't, great. So I let them work on that. I tell them they're going to lead their class. So we're 1 through 3. So they do, break up the PGY 1s, take 1 set of questions, 2s take another set of questions, 3s take another. And then I tell the group, the 3 residents that are leading it, I have the answers for you. Here you go. You don't have to get in front of people and not feel like you know the answer. We discuss it. Here are the answers. Now you lead your class, and then you guys all teach each other. So that's just another example of how we kind of break up the more classic format of, here's my clinical question. Should I or should not be? Should I be using DL or VL for intubation? Let's look at the literature, and then we'll come up with what we think is the answer at the end of our journal club. Just an example.
Yeah, I think the small group format is really helpful. One strategy we have used is that we use a critical appraisal form, and we assign the questions to each resident. So there's a leader, but then they assign. And so there isn't a resident who's not involved. You have to be involved. And that kind of gets into engagement, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it goes to our format. That's just how we approach our small groups. And it's very effective in keeping things organized, keeping things moving along. I do think that the food and socialization part of formatting is really important, because food will always bring people to you, and just having thinking of that when you're planning your formatting is important for where are you going to do it, what's it going to be like, what's the vibe at that place, which can be different at the hospital versus out of the hospital. Some places you have to be at the hospital because your group is so large, there's just no feasible way to rent out a place for 70 residents, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can make it a little more fun by, introducing food and other ways to socialize.
Did we talk about engagement? Is that not yet? Okay. Oh no! I'm sorry. I thought we were moving on. No, I think format is important. I will throw a comment in there, but I'll try to stay away from that. I think it really matters. The venue matters a lot with the format, and some venues are more suitable for certain types of formats than others, right? So I think having a nice quiet space is important, and really hard to concentrate. I'll get to that when I talk about engagement, but really hard. You have to be able to focus on the conversation, and you can have a lot of distractions. So I think that's an important consideration as well.
I'll lean towards you, Dan. A couple of things. We would love to do ours external. Love to have food, love to have it at attending homes. We outgrew attending homes. We're a 4-year, 16 resident per year program. It's just, I don't have enough folding chairs in my attic anymore. We unfortunately had a bad event, and I'm just bringing it out there if you're a PD or APD, something to think about, where there was a motor vehicle crash. Thank God, en route to Journal Club, because we used to have beer and wine at Journal Club. So if you're going to have a required educational activity and you're part of the team that's doing that, just having it off-site, just be aware of some of those issues, not to be a downer. Just thank God it was on the way and the resident didn't end up incarcerated because there was a death. A couple other things we do. We do small group work. We have some accountability, but now I've rebranded it as flipped classroom because if you do that, you can get some credit for the residents for the work they do in preparation for Journal Club. And I'll go into the way we break out in small groups in one of the other slides.
I was just going to add that how many of you are aware of a technique called team-based learning? Not too many. It's basically a way of using small groups within larger groups as a way of it's more or less teacher-centered, but focuses on the groups teaching each other. And I would challenge you to look at it and look at it as a possible way of doing Journal Club.
I think last thing I'll add is there is probably not like a one-size journal club that fits all programs. And that's part of why we wanted to do this like a panel, because we all have a lot of experience. There's been things that work for us for a couple of years, and then we rebrand or we change completely. And so what I think we do want to make sure you walk away with is this idea of, can we fill your toolkit with some ideas? Can we help equip you with something maybe you haven't done, or a way that you might consider rebranding or actually deviating, because there's going to be things that work and then things you have to change and things you want to change. And so hopefully this is helpful for that sense.
And our learners evolve over the years. You know, the learners right now are different than we were 10 years ago. So I think it's just important to also evolve as the learners are evolving. Do we have any questions from the audience on formatting? Yes.
Do you guys make it a mandatory for the residents?
Good question. So the question is, do we make it mandatory? Yes, we do. We have 10 sessions per year, and 6 of the 10 are required. I think everyone has some required component, and that certainly will help with attendance, and we'll get into attendance here. But Rebecca has like a lecture-based portion and then a journal club portion, and I believe the lecture base is required, but the journal club is not. But most of us have had some sort of requirement, yes. Other questions on formatting? Okay, so next we're going to get into attendance, and I'm going to hand over to Addie for that.
All right, so nobody can have a great journal club unless you have people present. So this is the first major barrier to tackle, is how do you get at least butts in seats or butts on Zoom so that you have people to theoretically participate in your journal club. When it comes to attendance, there are lots of different ways you can do this. You can use the carrot or you can use the stick, right? And so the stick is when you make attendance mandatory, then people start showing up. And part of this can be, counts towards resident conference attendance. Also for faculty, you can make it so that they have to attend a certain number of journal clubs for their bonusing structure. And when you tie it to people's ability to graduate or their ability to get paid, people start showing up. But we don't always want to come from a punitive place when we're trying to encourage people to show up to something. So I've found that through some of the formats I've been involved in, the ones that seem to work better are the ones that get you excited about attending something. So whether that is the famous Churrascaria Journal Club, where one of the people I used to work with would buy out like the Fogo de Chão, all the meats on a stick place. That was always the best attended journal club, and you could not eat until we had had a robust discussion about the paper. Everybody read that paper, and they showed up ready, and that journal club was quick and efficient, and we hit all the points. Using food as a venue. Additionally, think about the time that you're having your journal club. Is your journal club, last thing of the day, during didactics, right before everybody wants to go to lunch? Another great format I've seen before is the breakfast club. So journal club as a breakfast club, because everybody's showing up, their brains are ready. It's first thing in the morning, throw a little coffee on the situation, some breakfast items, engagement gets a little bit better. If you have a smaller group of people or a smaller program, it is kind of nice to go to someone's house to do this. Especially, it kind of allows residents to get a better sense of what their life might be able to be like as an attending. And there's something about just removing people from that hospital space that seems to really help with engagement. Another way of doing this is if you can find papers that are specific on a topic to the location where you're going to be. So, for example, if you have a paper on toxicology, we had a great toxicology journal club at the Snake House at the zoo one time. Very cool, right? Like everybody showed up for that one, and people were engaged because you're reading about snakes with the snakes. That's pretty fun. But other formats that I would encourage you to think about to count for attendance, especially as our residents become more non-traditional, people have families during residency, there's more things that they are responsible for, creating a hybrid option so that you can have people in person but still allow other residents or attendees to Zoom in and be able to be part of the conversation. That, of course, works better with sort of smaller groups, but then they get their attendance while still, being able to be at their home with their kids or not having to drive an hour and a half after working overnight so that they can participate in Journal Club. And this one kind of spans both engagement and attendance, but there's a lot of great virtual formats out there that work like virtual social media that you can use to sort of dovetail with your Journal Club. So there's 1,000 of these. The one that I happen to use, not paid by them, is Slack. Does anybody here use Slack? Yeah. So some of the best versions of Journal Club that I have been part of have continued over and spilled over into Slack so that the conversation can continue and people who weren't able to attend can still kind of see some of what was talked about. They can engage with it. They can get into little friendly social media battles over content that was covered at Journal Club. And so one way to help people get their attendance is to encourage them to engage on these platforms, and they will get some credit if they weren't able to attend in person. So it still keeps them engaged. It allows them an opportunity to participate in this even if they can't physically be here. And then the last point that I would like to make about attendance, right? If you can do anything to hype up your Journal Club, like before they do the big fights in Vegas, they do advertisements all over the place. If you can get a hot button topic from your emergency department, again, some of the best attended Journal Clubs I've seen were when the resident sees somebody on shift or something happens on shift that gets them really fired up, and then it's their Journal Club, and they're presenting a paper on something that we know is like a huge throwdown in the doc box, right? It's like fight night, except it's Journal Club no fists thrown night. But because everybody's aware of this situation, they want to know the information behind it, they kind of want to see how this turns out, you sort of, build up momentum for this thing that everybody's going to attend, and especially if you can get an attending on either side of a hot button issue who have different opinions, residents love that. Like I'm looking at the residents in the front row. If you had two attendings who were two different papers that wanted to have an argument on two sides of the coin about it, you would show up and watch that, right? Yes. Thank you for shaking your head in agreement. I appreciate that. Yeah. But yeah, so just doing what you can to make it not seem like it's going to be this painful thing. What can you do to like hype up and advertise your Journal Club as being something entertaining to be part of, something where we're going to sneak in some learning, but something that people actually want to go to, as opposed to, we're going to do Journal Club at noon after you sat through 3 lectures, and it's going to be a paper that none of you picked on calcium scores, right? Like, nobody wants that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, this is kind of this idea of, can Journal Club look different than just us sitting around and doing a critical appraisal form? Like, what are some things we can do that really innovate? Some things that we do are faculty, like clinical variation debates. So our PD might send out a controversial question to just the faculty, so no residents can see the answers. And faculty will respond with, well, here's what I do, here's what I think, here's my paper. And sometimes it gets a little heated. Sometimes it gets a little interesting. And then we'll kind of clean that up and share that with the residents. So this is offline or asynchronous, but a way to kind of stir up that fire in them. Like, here's some cheese for you, Brian. You can give a man a fish, or you can teach him to fish. But can we teach them to love fishing? Can we stir up that fire in them that makes them want to learn these skills so that they can have these debates and win them and be part of it? And we've done that in real time too. We've done debates with the faculty leading on things that are controversial, and that can really help with engagement. And you can do that in a lecture series or in your conference series, and do that in real time. And it's still EBM. It's still about a lot of these same principles we're trying to teach, but can we spice it up in new ways, or disguise it? I hesitate to say it like that, but disguise it in a way that continues engagement. You guys have anything else?
The one thing I would add is we try to do sessions that are really strategically relevant. So I talk with our operational leads, and a couple years ago, sepsis was a big strategic goal in our shop, like I'm betting it was in a lot of yours. Well, we did a series of journal clubs where the residents really felt like they had a voice in shaping what the sepsis pathway was going to look like. Our last journal club this past week was actually driven by an interaction we had with our Department of Internal Medicine and GI. What is the test characteristics of hemoccult, and should we be using it? And when you bring up to the residents that they hear no hemoccult, that equated to them no rectal exams. So that got the butts in the seats, pun intended. But it was a really interesting conversation about getting rid of that test question mark, but that was the cheese on the vegetable of, do you really understand test performance characteristics?
I just want to add one quick thing about that, though. This isn't attendance specific, but because there's variability in your attendance, you do have to be a little careful about what you sort of send everybody out in the world with after you do a journal club like that. So we use WhatsApp, and we continued the conversation, but we also put a little blurb about kind of what the paper was. I always post the papers to the WhatsApp, and all the faculty are on it, and if you haven't read it, that's a little bit on you. And then we put a little blurb about what our final conclusions were in some ways. So, because I have been told, I had 6 residents come up to me yesterday and say that they don't need to do GUIAC anymore, and that's because of your journal club. So we tried to, kind of anticipate that so that at least people are aware that this is a conversation that's being had. That's helpful.
I've been single-handedly accused of undermining department initiatives, and I just say, don't blame me, blame the literature. So the residents do like that too.
Does anyone have other ideas or examples or questions about attendance? Yeah.
We took that blurb on the WhatsApp to the next level up because I got accused of the same thing. By ophthalmology, when we said you could take ocentricated.
Right.
That was rough. So the department started asking us to publish like a PDF newsletter after every journal club,
Nice.
which then became something the residents, that's academic activity for them to do. So the chief assigned that, and that moved around that. It works. So we have that.
Yeah, that's great because you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get a little bit of academic output, but then you also have better engagement and attendance. So.
Yeah, I have a quick question for the audience. Who has more trouble with faculty attendance than resident attendance? Okay. Okay, I think that's the majority, but let's try it. Who has more trouble with resident attendance than faculty attendance? And who has more trouble with both? Okay, yeah. So for faculty attendance, we don't have this quite yet, but because we're still in conference, but part of attending conference gets faculty points towards their bonus, and encouraging some sort of structure like that for faculty, I think, is really, really helpful, where they get something for coming, and that something adds up to credit towards their academic input.
I think a lot of programs are starting to add that into like your expected academic activity or your bonus structure. But even then, people may not remember, or they still may not show up. And so I think there was one group here that does, they actually assign faculty to a month. So like, this is your journal club month. And that way they really don't have an excuse to forget. And I think that is a really cool way, I'm sorry to steal the thunder, but a really cool way to increase faculty engagement, and probably something I'm going to take away, because we don't do that right now, but I think it's really cool because just like you assign faculty lectures, you can assign faculty journal club, and then maybe they will show up a little more consistently. Anything else about attendance? Yes.
Just out of curiosity for the panel, do any of you do journal club less than, let's say, 6 times a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, thank you.
So the question was, does anyone do it less than 6 times? We do, yeah. I think everyone does more than that, 8 to 10. Yeah.
I would say it depends
Yep.
on the area.
We did it 10 times a year, so not during the summer we can do it.
Yeah.
Because people were vacationing and stuff like
What I was going to say was one of the things that we've done is because we have a lot of attendings who have smaller spaces, can't host in their home, we created a survey to, yeah, for them to offer to either co-host with somebody. Also, if you can't host, you can donate, so that someone cannot have to take the financial responsibility every single time. Because somehow I became mom to every one of our residents, and they call me mom. And I can only cook for so many people so many times a year.
Yeah.
It's very true. So I found like being able to donate whenever you are a single attending, have your apartment, you can't have 30 residents there. So it helps.
That's a great idea.
Sharing
And
the burden is.
Yeah.
yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot one other thing that I wanted to mention. If you are looking for new ways to get your residents to attend Journal Club and get attendance for it, you can also potentially consider letting them attend the Journal Clubs for the fellowships associated with your program instead of the main Journal Club, if that works better for their schedule, or if it's something they're more interested in. So, you know, if they aren't going to come to the main Journal Club, but they want to go to the EMS Journal Club, or even if they want to go to the Journal Club for trauma surgery, consider allowing them to do that. You know, with somebody saying, yes, indeed, they were there, but giving them credit. So then it's sort of, you know, they are self-selecting what journal club they want to go to, and that is more likely to get them to attend.
I just want to ask, how many of you have some kind of industry sponsor for journal clubs or whatever other activities? Does anybody still do that?
I wish, actually.
Just show of
Because I
hands.
think like, so a lot of the people who are like Team Health, I think that's what they're called, they sponsor, I feel like almost every time, at least, I don't know, maybe like half of the time somebody's sponsoring ours. And then the other half is just like all the residents and one of our attendees.
Yeah.
So 35 years ago, I know that's ancient history for most people here. When I first started at Albany Med, we had Journal Club that was sponsored monthly by a drug company. And the deal was that they could sponsor it and say something about their drug as long as they told me well in advance what they were going to be saying. And then I had equal amount of time afterwards to educate the residents about what the literature said about that particular drug. So if you can, and then we did the Journal Club, and they were the ones who put it to bill. About 10 or 15 years in, the college finally, we got an F for industry contacts. As a result, no more industry support. But then we did get things like Team Health and local community hospitals. They would sponsor the journal clubs as a means of recruiting our graduates and making our graduates aware of positions that were available in the immediate area. And there was maybe 4 or 5 different hospital systems. This was before the big conglomerates. I have no idea what they're doing now, but at any rate, so those are some options to be able to do it in places like restaurants or places where you can have someone else buy the food, you don't have to cook it all. I do like the idea of eating after. We always ate before, and I'm pretty sure that contributed to a drop-off in the conversation. I think that's extremely important. The other thing that really worked out well was when we were able to do with other specialties. You know, find some kind of a controversial point and have people from residents and attendings from other specialties be at the journal club, and we would both read and then would pick the papers that we would review.
And we do that too. We invite other specialties. Now, the attendance from them is poor. If you've ever tried to do that and try to get other specialties engaged, they just don't show up. But you can still get their opinions. Like, say, I understand if you can't come, but can you tell me what you think about these articles? And then you can share that, and that at least that's an outside perspective that you're sharing with your audience, and not just like the EM kind of mindset. So, okay, let's keep going because we're going to run out of time.
There was a question.
Yes.
We're almost out of time, guys.
Oh, already?
Okay. Okay, so we're going to touch on engagement. Actually, I think we kind of did engagement with attendance, so if we're good with that, we'll just move on to assessment. And so Brian is going to talk a little bit about what their team does for assessment.
So our journal club is kind of complicated. Getting back to what Rebecca talked about, our primary goal is to teach evidence-based medicine. So we have 3 levels of assessment I'll go over. The secondary goal of our journal club, I actually let the residents pick every year based on the SWOT. So about 2 years ago, they wanted the newest articles. Now this year, they want the classic articles. So the reason I bring that up is we divide our journal club into 2 groups. So group A are our PGY 1s and 2s. We've developed a structured curricula. Again, you heard me mention earlier with a flipped classroom model where they're sent out articles in advance, knowing when they come in, I'm going to have questions for them. And we've been doing this for about 15 years. We had used initially what were audience response clickers. The residents really hated that because if I wanted to, I knew who had what clicker, and I could say who had prepared and who hadn't. Now they much prefer using their phones. I don't think they've realized if I wanted to, I guess I could figure out cell phone numbers. But so that's assessment level 1. Did you show up prepared? Over the course of an academic year, we have a regularly recurring 12-month curricula. So July for the juniors is always, can you formulate a question? Do you understand the difference between a background and a foreground question? August every year is the hierarchy of evidence. The clinical article we always use with that would be an ACEP or other professional clinical policy where they're looking at the application of, can you grade evidence? What does that mean? And I'm happy to share, but every one of these 12 months, there is a short EBM teaching article that will teach you the concept of external validity or teach you about likelihood ratios or teach you about Bayesian logic. And then they take the Fresno test of evidence-based medicine, which conveniently is a 12-question test published in the BMJ in 2003. 12 questions, 12 months. It works pretty well. The last level of assessment we do is as part of their daily procedures, they have to log EBM activity on shift. I think it's hitting the press in a week or two in WestGem. We have analyzed 10,800 of those. I had a question on shift. And the first article we published is whether or not it actually changes patient care, whether they meet lifelong learning definitions. We've analyzed them to look and map them all to the ABEM core content so we know what areas they're asking questions. And then finally, using the Fresno methodology, we actually graded the quality of all of their questions. So happy to share anything about that level of assessment that we're doing in a couple of different places.
And let me just chime in that you guys all should look for this paper because it was really good.
I had a tough section editor.
But I was so thrilled to be able to review it and to help you get it through, and because it's really a nice system the way that you set it up.
Yeah, my section got axed, so I'll just throw a few comments in. I was going to talk about engagement. I mean, I think you heard the group use the word engagement about 28 times so far today. So obviously, it's a huge part of what we're doing with Journal Club. I think the key really is figure out what motivates the people in your group. So whether that's the faculty or the residents or whoever's involved, try to find ways to cater to that. In my group, we actually incentivize financially to be a Journal Club host. You get $1,000 basically. If you host a journal club. That's built into the departmental finances, so that's pretty incentivizing, right? And we go to restaurants. We give the residents food and beverages, We don't always withhold them. The story Addie was telling is from our residency. But, we don't always withhold them until after the discussion, but sometimes we have to. But the key here, I think, is just mix it up, make it different and interesting. Try to get people inspired to want to learn about this stuff, and don't approach it like it's boring and we got to do this and got to click the box. Make it interesting, make it fun for people, and then have a champion who's really interested and can reflects that interest to the audience, because nobody wants to listen to somebody drone on in a lecture, whether it's 5 or 15 minutes, right? So just try to keep it lively and be as creative as you can, because it can be fun. I think you probably all know that. So.
And to that point, at my shop currently, we actually give a monetary stipend to our EBM champion who runs Journal Club, who has dutifully showed up to this lecture to support me in the back row. So I appreciate that. But this takes a lot of work for whoever that person is. And if it is someone who's not getting buy down, they're not getting paid for this, they're not getting time carved out in their schedule, it's hard to be the person who creates something amazing if you don't really have the time or the support to do it. So if you are considering how to make Journal Club better at your institution, consider who is running that and what you are doing to make sure that they have the amount of time or the amount of compensation that they deserve requisite to the amount of work that they're putting in.
And I'll second that. It's a lot of work to be doing this every month. We don't get a stipend, but I do get the number of expected lectures that I give to the residents. That is cut way down because Journal Club is my kind of lecture to the residents, because I do that with them every month. And so there are ways to be creative and get credit for other work that you're expected to do instead of maybe money, which it's all kind of the same thing in the end a little bit. So there are creative ways that you can talk with your chair. If there's not specific dollars that you can get for being the EBM champion, that maybe some other way you can lessen your load of other things by being in this role, which is really important. Yes.
I have a question on engagement that I'd be curious to see what you guys think of. So obviously, one of the ongoing issues is how do you get people engaged if they don't read the articles and whatnot? So one of the things that I've been trying for the last couple of years is there's so much foam ed and review out there that I've been trying to pick a lot of the articles off of the EM Wrap thing, or off of Skeptic's Guide or any of the millions of these things, and that way they always get the article and they get they can listen to this podcast or they can read this rundown. I'm always a little torn about it because I think it kind of also says you don't have to read the article, but I feel if when we don't do it, people just don't read the article. So at least they can be semi-engaged. And I've kind of gone back and forth on this point a few times. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it.
Do you give them the summary before?
They get the articles and the links usually.
Because it might be fun if you kept it till after they've had a chance to read and talk about it, and you're like, oh, by the way, there's this little podcast you can listen to. So maybe that would take away some of that bias that you're worried about.
You're actually a best practice. A lot of us, I know we do that. So I'll change it up. They won't know whether I got it from Skeptic's Guide or MCRIT or somewhere else that does vetted appraisals, and then we don't give it to them till the end. So there's a little bit of the, hey, I'm going to hold you responsible, but this is really smart people that have a web page. It's like experts or people from out of town with their own slides.
Yeah.
So it's not me trying to convince them that this is how you would appraise it. It's some of these awesome sites.
And are you doing that with the residents that you have assigned to lead that journal club, or are you doing it for all the residents?
We can talk offline. We do 2 parallel journal clubs, and I go back and forth. So there's a Fresno journal club and then a senior where we focus on knowledge translation and implementation journal club. And then I need a second faculty member to do the fun stuff to be even cheesier.
You have the most complicated journal club I've
I don't get out.
Next you're going to take guys and one's blinded, I don't know.
This is the last slide. Oh, good.
It's a great idea, though, not just using stuff that's already been made, but having people, maybe the people who are presenting the residents who are presenting the journal club, to put together a half-page, summary of not just the facts from the article, but also what the group decided and thought for those that weren't able to make it to the discussion, and then you can send that out. And maybe you could find a creative way to make that a publication or at least qualify as scholarly activity for those residents. So, double dip.
Some places do. WashU publishes. I mean, there are a few places that publish their journal club summaries, for sure. And I would say to you, those resources are out there, and you should definitely use them. I mean, I'll be honest. For me, sometimes it's a cheat. Like, oh, they've changed the day, and I have to do journal club next week. Okay, I'm going to Skeptic's Guide. I'm going to look through, find something, and especially if they've given me a clinical question that happens to match something that Ken Milne has gone over. I'm definitely going to go over it, and I think everybody knows about them and that they all read it and that they're all going to know it right away. They don't always. They will catch on, though. So if you're doing the same site multiple times in the year, they're going to catch on and they're just going to go straight to that. But I pick it from there, and then we talk about the article with the residents who are going to present and lead their groups, and then I give them the answers, and then everyone else is fair game to look it up whenever they find it, if they find it.
There's also, as we are evolving, there's also a question of is EBM dead? And that's a total plug for a talk later today at 4 o'clock, I think. But Gordon Guyatt, who is the father of EBM, he kind of published this article saying, is EBM dead? And in the traditional sense of reading a paper from front to back, and is it more secondary peer-reviewed resources that we need to teach learners how to use properly? And so I think that, yes, you should be using those, but also, in the right context, like providing the article. But when they're out in clinical practice, they're probably going to be using these secondary peer-reviewed resources. And so I think understanding how to use those is really important.
And teaching them how to vet those is also a good new piece of journal club. I think that could be a journal club itself, because if you're using the wrong source, you're just getting garbage, right?
We almost need a critical appraisal form for the foam websites.
There are.
For those of you who aren't playing 3D chess with your do you have a particular split between foundational and new stuff? Do you skew one way or the other? How do you decide which of those two to go? I like the idea of the juniors doing foundational and kind of as you move along going to the newer stuff. How do you guys tackle that?
I think a few people have said it changes with what the residents want, and that's definitely been true. I think I skew to the clinical question that residents are struggling with at that moment, but I feel like I don't do enough of the foundational. So I think, and then there may be years where people really just want to do foundational studies. I think it's an ongoing struggle to figure that out.
So we have a pretty good mix, I think, and we don't really dictate what particular type of article someone's going to do. In fact, we kind of let the residents pick what they want to talk about for the most part. And I will say they sometimes pick a really terrible article, and that's actually fun too, because we get to rip that thing apart and just go to town. So, and hopefully it's not one of our faculty who are a co-author on the paper, but and that's happened. But it's a really good opportunity for them to not only exercise some decision making, which will increase their engagement, and knowing that it was one of their colleagues that picked the article probably increases engagement too. But I think it also is important that they have a chance to, kind of sound off on what they like and don't like about different manuscripts.
And there's one other thing that I think is really critical, and that is that there should be a takeaway message, like, how is this going to change, or is it going to change your practice? And that should be the bottom line of every journal club, that you take away from it, yeah, we reviewed the article, it really sucks, and it's not going to change what I'm doing.
And I will say, does anyone ever have those many months in a row where you don't change your practice? Like every journal club, you're like, these articles are crap, so I'm not going to change my practice, right? So that can create some disillusionment with the residents. So sprinkling in maybe a topic here and there where you're like, we haven't had a practice-changing journal club in a while, probably time to do that, because otherwise they're just going to show up and be like, well, what does it matter? We're not going to change our practice, because it's always, they're never good enough. We always pick them apart so bad. But sprinkling in one, last year we did one on C-spine clearance with CT, and do you need to send them home in a cervical collar. And we actually ended up changing our practice based on that journal club. And so having those once in a while is really important, I think, so that they do understand, yes, actually this does affect your practice. And it's not just like ripping apart the articles and then not doing anything afterwards. So.
I think one of the cool things that you can do in terms of can you operationalize Journal Club, can you engage the residents in your decisions? So I lead our EBM curriculum, but our Journal Club is led by 3 faculty members. One is a researcher, one is in operations, and one is in education. And so collectively then, they can be strategic about, can we take walkaways from this and apply it clinically, or do we need to take walkaways from this and apply it to our education curriculum? And so maybe you're the EBM champion, but do you have some friends you can bring with you and can make this more meaningful for your system?
I think we're out of time. Please scan this QR code and give SAEM some feedback on this talk. Are there any last-minute questions for the group? Yes.
Last one, a quick one. Do any of you offer CME to your faculty for participating? Because I've tried this and I've been told it can't be done. But
We do.
You guys
Yeah.
do?
Mhm.
Okay.
We do. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you so much for coming.